I broke up with my boyfriend because I believed that since he was supporting my daughter and me, he had the right to have an opinion on her upbringing. Now my daughter got pregnant and he doesn't want to help us. I'm currently sitting in my kitchen staring at a positive pregnancy test that feels like a personal attack from the universe, while my phone mocks me with a number-blocked notification. It is absolutely mind-boggling how someone who claimed to love us for 5 years can just flip a switch and become a stranger. The second things get complicated. Mark and I had what most people would call a perfect setup. Or at least it was until he started overstepping the very clear boundaries I set as a mother. For 5 years, he was the one who paid the rent for our beautiful 3-bedroom apartment, covered the tuition for Chloe's private school, and never blinked at the credit card bills I racked up. I thought he did those things because he valued our presence in his life, not because he was buying a seat at the parental table. Our bond was built on the idea that he was a partner, not a dictator, but men always find a way to let their egos ruin a good thing. The trouble really started when Chloe turned 15 and started wanting to explore her own independence, as any normal teenager does. Mark suddenly decided that because his name was on the lease, he had the right to impose these archaic rules and structure on a girl who wasn't even his biological daughter. He would grill her about where she was going, who she was with, and try to enforce a 10 o'clock curfew on weekends like we were living in the 50s. I constantly had to remind him that Chloe is a free spirit and that my parenting style is based on trust, not surveillance. He would look at me with this exhausting, patronizing expression and say that trust requires verification, which is just code for wanting to control everything. It felt like every dinner conversation turned into a debate where he tried to make me feel like I was failing because I didn't want to break my daughter's spirit. I deserve a partner who supports my vision, not someone who uses his financial contributions as leverage to undermine my authority. It became clear to me that Mark viewed his money as a down payment on Chloe's obedience, which is frankly disgusting when you think about it. I started feeling this heavy weight in my chest every time he'd sign a check or pay a bill, knowing he felt authorized to judge us because of it. I am her mother, the only one who truly understands her needs, and I wasn't going to let him buy his way into her psyche. The tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife, and instead of backing off, Mark just leaned into his concerned parent persona harder. He would bring up her grades or her choice of friends as if those were his business to manage, ignoring the fact that I had it all under control. The breaking point happened on a Tuesday night when Chloe came home 2 hours late from a concert, looking perfectly happy and safe. Mark didn't even wait for her to get to her room before he started lecturing her about responsibility and safety risks in that clinical, annoying voice of his. I stepped in immediately because I won't have my daughter bullied in her own home, especially not over something as trivial as time. I told him right then and there that if he couldn't respect my sovereignty as a mother, he didn't belong in this family. He had the audacity to say that providing for a family means being part of the family's decisions, which is the ultimate form of financial blackmail. I didn't hesitate. I told him to pack his bags and leave because my daughter is not for sale for the price of a monthly rent payment. I honestly expected him to apologize or realize how ridiculous he was being, but he just looked at me with this cold, eerie silence. He packed his things that night, and as he walked out the door, he didn't even look back at the girl he supposedly considered a daughter. It was so incredibly petty of him to choose his rules over our relationship, proving that he never really loved us for who we are. I felt a massive sense of relief the next morning, convinced that I had finally reclaimed my life and my daughter's freedom. We didn't need his guidance or his restrictive curfews to survive. We just needed each other. Of course, the bills started piling up, but I figured that was a small price to pay for being the sole decision-maker in my own household. For the last 2 years, I've been doing my best to keep our heads above water, even though the world seems determined to make it difficult. Chloe has been enjoying her freedom, or so I thought, until she started getting moody and skipping school more often than not. I didn't want to be the bad guy like Mark was, so I gave her space, believing she would find her own way eventually. Then, yesterday morning, I found the pregnancy test in the bathroom trash can, and my entire world came crashing down. She's only 17 and she won't even tell me who the father is, probably because she's scared of being judged. It's a medical and financial crisis that I shouldn't have to face alone, especially when there's a man out there who spent 5 years acting like he was her father. Naturally, my first instinct was to reach out to Mark because despite our breakup, he still has a moral obligation to the child he helped raise. I called him, expecting a civil conversation about how we were going to handle this emergency, but he was incredibly distant. I told him Chloe was pregnant and that we needed him now more than ever, especially with the medical costs looming over us. Instead of being the parental figure he always claimed to be, he told me that since I fought so hard for him to have zero say in her life, he finally realized he also has zero obligation. It was the most heartless thing I have ever heard, a complete betrayal of the 5 years we spent together. He actually said, "You won, Sarah. You're in total control now," as if this were some kind of game he was winning. He is using a child's pregnancy as a way to win a 2-year-old argument, which just goes to show how toxic he truly is. He has the money to make this go away, to ensure Chloe has the best care, but he's choosing to be a deadbeat out of spite. It's not about the money for me. It's about the principle that you don't just walk away from a family when things get hard. He's acting like my independence was a contract that signed away his humanity, which is a total distortion of what I actually said. I was talking about upbringing and discipline, not about him abandoning a teenager in her hour of need. He's twisted my words to justify his own greed and lack of empathy, and it makes me sick. I'm sitting here now looking at the bills and the test, realizing that Mark was just waiting for us to fail so he could feel superior. He didn't want to help Chloe. He wanted to control her. And now that he can't control her, he thinks he doesn't have to help her. It's a very calculated, cold-blooded move that I never expected from someone I shared a bed with for half a decade. He's trying to make me feel like this is my fault because I didn't let him play Daddy Warbucks with my daughter's life. But I know the truth. A real man would step up regardless of the past, especially when a young girl's future is on the line. He's just showing his true colors now, and they are as ugly as the bills sitting on my counter. The worst part is seeing Chloe's face and knowing that the man she called dad for 5 years is basically laughing at us from his high horse. He could fix this with a single transfer, but he'd rather watch us struggle just to prove a point about authority. It's such a typical male reaction. If they can't be the boss, they won't play at all. I didn't ask for much, just the right to raise my own daughter without being checked at every turn, and he's turned that into a reason to be a monster. I'm going to have to figure this out on my own, but I will never forget how he used our vulnerability to settle an old score. He thinks he's teaching me a lesson, but all he's doing is proving that I was right to kick him out in the first place. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says, so you fired the dictator who was paying for everything because he wanted your daughter to have a curfew, and now you're mad the bank account won't fund her teen pregnancy? You can't tell a man he has zero rights and then demand he keep the ATM open for a child that isn't his. Ops reply, it's about the bond they had, not the money, although the money is the least he could do for the trauma of leaving us high and dry when he was the one who insisted on being a father. Anonymous user 2 says Mark's opinion was actually a warning about exactly this. He saw the lack of boundaries and tried to step in, and you treated him like a villain for it. Chloe being pregnant 17 is the direct result of the sovereignty you were so proud of. Ops reply, he was just trying to control us and make himself feel important. A curfew wouldn't have changed her biology or the fact that things happen. He's just using this as an excuse to be a deadbeat. Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and the silence from Mark's end is honestly deafening and frankly quite cruel. I decided to give him a chance to do the right thing, so I sent him a very detailed 10-paragraph text explaining exactly how distraught Chloe is right now. I laid it all out for him, reminding him that as the man of the house for so long, he has a lingering duty to ensure she has some form of stability during this crisis. I even went through the trouble of researching and sending him a list of the necessary prenatal vitamins and the projected costs for the private clinic I want her to use. I figured that once he saw the actual numbers and the reality of the situation, his conscience would finally kick in. But he didn't even have the decency to reply to me, which is just another level of cowardice I wasn't prepared for. Instead of a response from the man himself, I got a call from his sister, who has always been a bit of a busybody anyway. She had the nerve to tell me that Mark isn't even in town and is currently busy planning a luxury trip to Europe for the summer. A trip! Can you imagine the absolute lack of soul it takes to spend money on a vacation when your daughter is literally facing a life-altering medical situation? I told her straight up that he is behaving like a monster by choosing a getaway over a family crisis that he helped create by disappearing. She didn't even have a sympathetic tone. She just laughed and asked me what family I was talking about. She said I made it clear years ago that he was just a bank account with too many opinions, and that she's glad he's finally listening to me. The way people in his life are twisting my words is truly disgusting, as if having a boundary about parenting means I wanted him to become a heartless stranger. I am absolutely appalled by how some people can prioritize rules or hurt feelings over the actual lives of human beings. He's sitting on enough money to pay for Chloe's entire pregnancy and the first year of the baby's life without even feeling it. Yet, he's choosing to spend it on museums and wine in France. It's a deliberate act of malice designed to make me feel small, but it only makes him look like a giant coward. I told his sister that if he goes on that trip, he is dead to us, but she just hung up on me like I was the one being unreasonable. My daughter deserves so much better than a man who only cares about his own comfort and his freedom to be selfish. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says you spent years telling him he wasn't her father when he tried to help, and now you're shocked he's spending his own money on himself? He isn't a deadbeat because he's not the dad. He's just an ex-boyfriend who finally took your advice and walked away. Ops reply, that's incredibly selfish of him. He's a grown man who played a role in her life for years, so he should be helping a child in need regardless of the technicalities. Anonymous user 2 says, I love how you call him a dictator when he wants a curfew, but he's the man of the house when you need a check for vitamins. Which one is it, Sarah? You can't have absolute sovereignty and a provider at the same time. Ops reply, because it's the right thing to do. My sovereignty doesn't mean he gets to be a deadbeat and ignore a crisis just because his feelings were hurt 2 years ago. Update 2. It's been 1 week since my last update, and things in this house are getting significantly worse by the hour. Chloe has been crying almost non-stop because she spent all morning looking at these aesthetic nurseries on TikTok and realizing we can't afford any of it. I had to have the most heartbreaking conversation with her, explaining that because Mark is being so difficult, we might actually have to move to a much smaller apartment in a worse neighborhood. Watching her face fall was like a knife to the heart, and I couldn't help but feel a fresh wave of rage toward the man who is causing all of this. I decided to try calling him one more time, but this time I used a friend's phone so he wouldn't recognize the number and hide like he usually does. He actually picked up, but as soon as he realized it was me, he didn't even sound surprised or annoyed. He sounded so incredibly calm that it was actually insulting, as if my life being in shambles didn't affect him in the slightest. I didn't hold back. I told him exactly how cruel he was being and how he was breaking Chloe's heart by letting her down like this. I told him he was essentially punishing a pregnant teenager just because he couldn't get his way with me 2 years ago. He just sighed that same arrogant, heavy sigh he used to give me and said, Sarah, you told me very clearly that if I wasn't the father, I had no right to set rules for her life. I finally accepted that you were right. He then had the gall to ask if I usually call total strangers and demand thousands of dollars for my personal problems. I was so furious that I hung up on him before I said something I might actually regret, though he deserves every insult. It is so clear to me now that he is trying to punish me for being an independent woman who refused to bow down to his authority. He's using his financial power as a weapon, proving that he only ever helped us so he could have someone to look down on. He's probably enjoying this, sitting in his big apartment knowing that we're struggling to figure out how to pay for basic prenatal care. He calls it accepting I was right, but it's really just a very sophisticated form of emotional and financial abuse. A real man would see the situation for what it is, an emergency, and put aside his petty grievances to ensure a child is safe. Instead, he's hiding behind my own words like a shield, which is just a pathetic way to avoid his moral responsibilities. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, independent woman usually implies that you pay your own bills and handle your own daughter's mistakes without calling an ex for a handout. You aren't independent. You're just a former dependent who got fired and is now trying to sue for back pay. Ops reply, I pay my bills. But this is an emergency and he clearly has the means to help without it hurting him. It's a moral obligation that transcends our breakup. Anonymous user 2 says your daughter is crying over TikTok nurseries while you're facing eviction. It sounds like she's just as delusional and entitled as you are. Maybe Mark was right about that discipline thing after all. Ops reply, she's a child going through a terrifyingly hard time and she deserves the best start in life. It's not entitlement to want your daughter to be happy and comfortable. Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my last update and I just found out something that makes my blood absolutely boil with indignation. Through a mutual acquaintance, I discovered that Mark is officially dating someone else, a woman who apparently has no children and no baggage, as people like him probably call it. It's so clear to me now that he never truly loved Chloe or me. He just wanted a little family project that he could control with his wallet until it got too messy. Now that I'm not there to be his submissive little partner and Chloe isn't a cute little girl, he can dress up in private school uniforms. He's moved on to someone easier. I was so disgusted that I sent him one last message, telling him I hope he's happy knowing he's essentially abandoning a pregnant teenager to go play house with some new girl. The reply he sent back was so cold it felt like a slap in the face. I didn't abandon her. You evicted me from her life because you didn't like my advice. Enjoy your authority. The level of betrayal here is truly unreal, and I can't believe I ever let this man into my home. He is literally using my own words against me just to save a few bucks on medical bills, pretending that my desire for autonomy was a green light for him to become a sociopath. I was so desperate that I actually tried to go to his office to talk some sense into him face to face, thinking he couldn't be this heartless in person. But when I got there, the security wouldn't even let me up to his floor, saying I wasn't on the approved list. He actually went as far as to put a security block on me at his workplace. He's treating me like some kind of obsessed fan or a criminal, all because I'm asking him to be the man he pretended to be for 5 years. It's a total character assassination, and it's obvious he's told everyone a twisted version of why we broke up to make himself look like the victim. He's probably telling his new girlfriend that I'm just some crazy ex who wants his money, conveniently leaving out the part where he spent half a decade acting like Chloe's father. I am just so tired of being the one who has to hold everything together while he gets to live his best life without a single consequence. He thinks he's won because he's free from my rules, but he's really just lost his soul in the process. I'll find a way to take care of Chloe, but I hope he knows that he's the reason she's suffering right now. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says this is the ultimate be careful what you wish for story. You literally told him his money didn't buy him a seat at the table and now you're shocked that the table is empty. You kicked him out of the father role, Sarah. You can't draft him back in now that there's a crisis. Ops reply, I was right then and I'm right now. A mother's authority over her child is non-negotiable. He's just using that as a convenient excuse because he's a coward who's afraid of real responsibility. Anonymous user 2 says I hope you're packing those boxes because that smaller apartment is calling your name. Mark is clearly done with your drama, and honestly, can you blame him? He gave you exactly what you demanded, total control. Ops reply, I'll find a way to survive without his rules or his help, even if he's being a complete and total jerk. A mother's strength is something a man like him will never understand. Update 4. It's been 1 month since my last update, and the reality of our situation has finally settled in like a thick, suffocating fog. I had to sell my car last week just to cover the initial medical deposits and the first few rounds of testing Chloe needed, and the loss of that bit of freedom has been devastating. But what's even worse is the atmosphere in our home. Chloe is absolutely furious with me, and the things she's saying are tearing me apart. She told me yesterday that if I had just let Mark be a dad and kept my mouth shut about the curfews, we would be in a mansion right now instead of packing boxes for a move to a tiny 2-bedroom in the city. I can't believe my own daughter is taking his side, essentially telling me that my dignity and my rights as a mother should have been traded for his bank account. She's actually started saying that his rules were logical now that she sees what happens when there isn't any structure, which is just proof of how much he brainwashed her. She's looking at her situation, pregnant, broke, and moving, and she's blaming the person who stayed, instead of the man who walked away with his millions. It's like the ghost of his bank account is still haunting our lives, making her think that a strict curfew was a small price to pay for a gilded cage. I try to explain to her that I was protecting her from a man who wanted to own her, but she just screams that she'd rather be owned in a nice house than free in the slums. It's heartbreaking to see her value herself and our bond so little compared to the luxury Mark provided. Meanwhile, I had the misfortune of seeing a photo Mark posted on social media. Someone must have shown it to me because I'm still blocked. He's standing on a balcony in what looks like a beautiful villa in Italy, holding a glass of wine and looking perfectly happy and relaxed. He looks younger, lighter, and completely unbothered by the fact that the girl he called daughter is currently selling her belongings to buy baby clothes. It's the most malicious thing he's ever done to me. He gave me exactly what I asked for. He took my words literally and used them as a trap, waiting for the moment when my freedom would become a burden so he could watch me drown in it. My absolute sovereignty feels like a prison cell he built for me by simply stepping aside and letting me lead. He didn't just leave, he stayed away with a calculated precision that is meant to destroy me, and he's doing it all with a smile on his face.